At 48, Corwin had learned to carry grief like an old coat, worn, familiar, and always there. Every Sunday morning, he and his 7-year-old daughter Naomi visited the cemetery on Maple Hill, placing fresh daisies on his late wife's grave. It was their routine, their way of keeping her memory alive. But one Sunday, everything changed. As they approached the familiar headstone, Corwin noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. There in the stone vase sat a bouquet of white lilies, flowers he hadn't placed. His heart quickened. Who else would visit Lydia's grave? Who remembered her enough to come here quietly without a word? The mystery would soon reveal a connection he never expected, one that would change how he understood love, loss, and the hidden bonds that hold us together. But who could it be? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The white lilies stayed with Corwin long after he and Naomi left the cemetery that morning. He couldn't shake the image of them, pristine, deliberate, placed with care. Someone had been there, someone who knew Lydia, someone who remembered. 3 years had passed since Lydia's death, and Corwin still measured time in befores and afters. Before, he'd been an architect with a growing reputation, designing homes that married function with beauty. Before, he'd wake to Lydia's laughter echoing through their kitchen, the smell of coffee mingling with whatever she was baking. Before, life had made sense. After was different. After meant single parenthood, reduced work hours, and a constant ache that settled somewhere between his chest and throat. After meant learning to braid Naomi's hair from YouTube videos, burning dinner more often than not, and lying awake at night, wondering if he was doing any of it right. Their home on Sycamore Street still held Lydia everywhere. Her books lined the shelves in the living room, their spines creased from repeated readings. The garden she'd planted bloomed faithfully each spring, roses, lavender, and black-eyed Susans that required more attention than Corwin knew how to give. Photographs covered the mantel and walls, frozen moments of a life that felt increasingly distant. In their bedroom, tucked in a small wooden box on his nightstand, Lydia's wedding ring caught the morning light. He couldn't bring himself to move it, couldn't imagine a day when opening that box wouldn't make his breath catch. Naomi was 7 now, and sometimes Corwin saw Lydia so clearly in her it hurt. The same dark curls that refused to be tamed, the same thoughtful way of tilting her head when processing something new. But Naomi also carried the weight of loss in ways no child should. She was quieter than other kids her age, more careful with her words, as if she'd learned early that life was fragile and required gentle handling. "Daddy?" Naomi's voice broke through his thoughts as they drove home from the cemetery. She sat in the back seat, her small hands folded in her lap. "Who do you think left those flowers?" Corwin glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe Mommy has a friend we don't know about." The innocence of it struck him. A friend we don't know about. The phrase suggested mystery without malice, curiosity without suspicion. Children understood the world in simpler terms. "Maybe," he said softly. At home, his sister Beverly was waiting on the porch, a casserole dish in her hands. She did this often, showed up unannounced with food, with help, with the kind of steady presence that kept Corwin tethered to the world. Beverly was 3 years older, practical where he was creative, grounded where he tended to drift. "You're late," she said, though her tone held no reproach. "Church run long?" "Cemetery," Corwin replied, unlocking the door. Naomi darted inside, heading straight for her room. Beverly followed him to the kitchen, setting the casserole on the counter. "You go every week, Cor. That's good, but what?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I worry about you." "About both of you. You're stuck." The word landed heavily. Was he stuck? Or was he simply honoring his wife's memory the only way he knew how? "I'm managing," he said. "Managing isn't living." Beverly touched his arm, her expression soft with concern. "Lydia wouldn't want you frozen like this." He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the white lilies flickered in his mind. Someone else remembered Lydia, someone else visited her grave. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. That evening, after Naomi was asleep, Corwin stood at his bedroom window, looking out toward the distant hill where the cemetery lay. The wooden box on his nightstand drew his eye. He opened it, lifting Lydia's ring, feeling its weight. He'd given it to her 12 years ago, watching her eyes fill with tears as he slipped it onto her finger. Now it was just an object, a symbol of something that had been. He thought about Lydia's illness, how quickly it had consumed her. 6 months from diagnosis to death. Aggressive, the doctors had said, as if that word explained the devastation. She'd been 42, vibrant and full of plans. They were going to renovate the kitchen. Naomi was going to start piano lessons. They talked about a trip to the coast that summer. Instead, there were hospital rooms and hushed conversations with oncologists. There were Naomi's confused questions and Lydia's brave smiles that didn't reach her eyes. There was the morphine haze at the end, Lydia's hand growing lighter in his, until one morning she simply wasn't there anymore. The funeral had been large. Lydia had been beloved, a volunteer at the local library, an active member of their church, a woman who remembered birthdays and brought soup when neighbors were sick. Hundreds of people came to pay respects, to share memories, to cry alongside him. But in the 3 years since, the crowd had thinned. Life moved on for everyone else. Only Corwin remained, circling the same grief week after week. He set the ring back in its box and moved to the closet, where Lydia's clothes still hung. He'd meant to donate them, had promised Beverly he would, but every time he reached for a hanger, he couldn't do it. The fabric still smelled faintly of her perfume, something floral and light that he'd bought her for Christmas years ago. His phone buzzed. A text from Beverly. "Stop overthinking. Go to bed." He smiled despite himself. She knew him too well. In Naomi's room, he found his daughter sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. A drawing lay on her nightstand, a crayon picture of 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a small girl. "Mommy, Daddy, and me," the caption read in Naomi's careful print. She drew these often, trying to preserve memories that were already fading. Corwin kissed her forehead and returned to his own room. Sleep came slowly, his mind circling back to those white lilies. Who had left them? An old friend? A former colleague? Someone from church he'd never met? And why now, 3 years later? The questions followed him into restless dreams, where Lydia walked through gardens filled with white flowers, always just ahead of him, always just out of reach. Morning came with pale light and the sound of Naomi padding down the hall. Monday meant school, work, the ordinary rhythm of their lives. But something had shifted. The lilies had opened a door in Corwin's mind, and he couldn't quite close it again. As he made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, the only meal he could reliably produce, Naomi climbed onto her chair at the kitchen table. "Daddy, can we go back to the cemetery this week?" "Not on Sunday?" He paused, spatula in hand. "Why, sweetheart?" "I want to see if there are more flowers." So she'd been thinking about it too. The mystery had caught her imagination, just as it had caught his. "Maybe," he said. "We'll see." But even as he spoke, he knew they would go. The lilies had disrupted their carefully maintained routine, and neither of them could simply let it pass. Someone out there remembered Lydia, honored her, visited her in secret. And suddenly, more than anything, Corwin needed to know who. The following Sunday arrived with overcast skies and a chill that hinted at the changing season. Corwin and Naomi made their familiar drive to Maple Hill Cemetery, but this time anticipation hummed beneath the routine. Would there be more flowers? Would the mystery deepen or resolve? As they walked up the gentle slope toward Lydia's grave, Corwin's heart began to pound. Even from a distance he could see them, fresh white lilies in the stone vase, their petals pristine against the grey marble of the headstone. But this time there was something else. A small envelope rested beneath the vase, tucked carefully so the wind wouldn't carry it away. Corwin's hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for formal correspondence. His name wasn't on it, just a single word written in elegant script. "Lydia." Naomi pressed close to his side. "What is it, Daddy?" "A note," he said quietly. His fingers worked the envelope open, and he pulled out a single card. The handwriting was the same, careful, measured, unmistakably feminine. She was unforgettable. V, that was all. 5 words and a single initial. But those words hit Corwin like a physical blow. V, who was V? And why did they feel entitled to leave messages at his wife's grave? "What does it say?" Naomi asked. Corwin read it aloud, his voice rougher than he intended. "She was unforgettable." "That's nice," Naomi said with a child's simple acceptance. Mommy was unforgettable, but for Corwin, nothing about this felt simple. A stranger was visiting Lydia's grave, leaving flowers, writing notes. Someone who signed with just an initial, as if Lydia would have known immediately who it was. As if this person had a claim to Lydia's memory that didn't require full identification. He looked around the cemetery, half expecting to see someone watching. But there were only the usual morning visitors, an elderly man tending a nearby plot, a young couple walking hand in hand toward the newer section. No one paid him any attention. "Does Mommy have a secret friend?" Naomi asked, her voice filled with wonder rather than concern. Secret friend. The phrase lodged in Corwin's mind, both innocent and troubling. Had Lydia kept secrets from him? Had there been parts of her life he'd never known about? He knelt beside the grave, placing their daisies next to the lilies. The contrast struck him, his simple grocery store flowers beside these elegant, clearly expensive blooms. Even in death someone was outdoing him. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said finally. "But I'm going to find out." On the drive home, Corwin's mind raced. V, who did they know with that initial? His thoughts immediately went to Lydia's address book, still in the drawer of her nightstand. Surely the answer was there. At home, he went straight to the bedroom, while Naomi settled in front of the television. The address book was small, leather-bound, filled with Lydia's neat handwriting. He flipped through the pages, scanning names. Valerie, Vernon, Vincent, but none of them seemed right. These were distant relatives, old co-workers, people who had sent cards after the funeral and then faded back into their own lives. Then he remembered Lydia's college yearbooks, stored in boxes in the attic. If this was an old friend, someone from before he'd known her, the answer might be there. The attic was dusty and cramped, filled with the accumulated debris of their life together. He found the boxes labeled college and pulled them down, sneezing as dust motes swirled in the dim light. Inside were yearbooks from State University, dated 25 years ago. He opened the first one, turning pages until he found Lydia's sophomore year photo. She looked impossibly young, her face unlined, her smile bright with possibility. The girl in that photo had no idea what waited for her. Marriage, motherhood, illness, death? He scanned the index, looking for names beginning with V. There were several: Vivian Sterling, Victor Bradford, Veronica Hayes. Wait, he'd been instructed not to use Hayes. He scanned again: Vivian Sterling, Victor Bradford, Veronica Ashwood. He flipped to their photos, studying faces, trying to imagine which of them might have meant enough to Lydia to visit her grave decades later. Vivian Sterling's face stopped him. Something in her smile, in the warmth of her eyes, suggested a depth of feeling. The caption beneath her photo listed her activities: student council, debate team, volunteer corps. A serious student then. Someone who cared about things. Corwin kept digging through the boxes. Beneath the yearbooks were photo albums, their pages thick with memories of Lydia's college years. He found pictures of her with groups of friends, laughing at parties, studying in the library. And there, appearing again and again, was Vivian Sterling. The two of them had their arms around each other in photo after photo, their faces close, their expressions radiating joy. In one picture, they sat on a dorm room bed, wearing matching sweatshirts, making silly faces at the camera. The ease between them was obvious. This wasn't just an acquaintance or casual friend. This was someone Lydia had been close to, someone who mattered. On the back of one photo, Lydia had written in her distinctive hand, "V and me, junior year. Best friends forever, best friends forever." But Corwin had never heard Lydia mention a Vivian. In 12 years of marriage, through countless conversations about her past, her college years, her old friends, he couldn't recall that name ever coming up. Why? He took the photo downstairs and called Beverly. She answered on the third ring, sounding breathless. "Did I catch you at a bad time?" he asked, just finishing a run. "What's up?" "Did Lydia ever mention someone named Vivian?" "Vivian Sterling?" There was a pause. "Vivian? That name sounds familiar, but I can't place it." "Why, I found more flowers at the grave, with a note this time. Signed with just V, flowers again. Cor, I think it might be this Vivian person." They were close in college. Really close, from what I can see in the photos. But Lydia never talked about her. Beverly was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. People drift apart. Maybe they had a falling out. Then why is she visiting the grave now? Why the flowers, the note? I don't know. But you sound upset. Upset didn't quite capture it. Corwin felt unmoored, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. For 3 years, he'd been the keeper of Lydia's memory, the one who honored her, the one who made sure she wasn't forgotten. And now this stranger, this Vivian, was intruding on that sacred space. "I want to know who she is," he said. "I want to know what she meant to Lydia." "Be careful," Beverly warned. "Sometimes the past is better left alone." But Corwin couldn't leave it alone. That night, after putting Naomi to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with the photo of young Lydia and Vivian, studying it. These two women had clearly loved each other in the way that young friends do, intensely, completely, with the certainty that nothing would ever come between them. Yet something had. He thought about the note again. She was unforgettable. Not she is unforgettable, but was, past tense, as if acknowledging that Lydia was gone, that this was a memory being honored rather than a presence being celebrated. There was grief in that word choice. Deep grief. Corwin pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. His own handwriting looked crude compared to the elegant script on the card, but he pressed on. "I'm Lydia's husband. I'd like to talk. Please call me." He added his phone number and signed it simply. Corwin. On Tuesday, his day off from the architecture firm where he worked part-time, Corwin drove to the cemetery alone. The morning was quiet, mist clinging to the grass. He approached Lydia's grave with the envelope in his hand, tucked it carefully into a waterproof plastic bag, and placed it beside the vase. "I don't know what this is about, Lydia," he said softly to the headstone. "But I need to understand. I need to know who this person was to you." The marble offered no answers, but Corwin felt a strange sense of relief. He'd done something. He'd reached out across the mystery. Now all he could do was wait. He stood there for a long moment, his hand resting on the cool stone. "I miss you," he whispered. "Every single day I miss you." The wind picked up, rustling through the nearby trees, and Corwin turned to leave. Behind him, Lydia's grave stood quiet and still, holding its secrets close, waiting to see if the past would finally speak. 3 days passed with no response. Corwin checked his phone obsessively, willing it to ring. He drove by the cemetery twice, resisting the urge to stop and check if his note was still there. At work, he found himself staring at blueprints without seeing them, his mind circling endlessly around that single initial V, Vivian, a best friend Lydia had somehow erased from her life. On Wednesday morning, Corwin called in sick to work. It wasn't entirely a lie. He felt unwell, though the sickness was one of restless curiosity rather than physical ailment. After dropping Naomi at school, he drove to the cemetery and parked where he had a clear view of Lydia's grave. The morning stretched long. He watched groundskeepers make their rounds, trimming grass and tending to flower beds. An elderly woman visited a nearby plot, kneeling stiffly to place a single rose. A young man stood at a fresh grave, his shoulders shaking with sobs. But no one approached Lydia's headstone. By noon, Corwin felt foolish. What was he doing? Staking out his wife's grave like some kind of detective? This wasn't him. He'd never been the suspicious type, never questioned Lydia's past, or demanded to know every detail of her life before him. But then, he'd never known there were details worth questioning. He drove home feeling defeated and slightly ridiculous. Beverly's car was in his driveway. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of concern and exasperation. "Mrs. Howell called me," she said without preamble. Said she saw you sitting in the cemetery parking lot for hours. Want to tell me what's going on? Corwin unlocked the door and Beverly followed him inside. In the kitchen, he put on coffee, more for something to do with his hands than because he wanted it. I'm trying to figure this out, he said. The flowers, the note. This Vivian person. I left her a message asking her to call me. And? Nothing. No response. Beverly leaned against the counter. Maybe she doesn't want to talk. Maybe she just wants to pay her respects privately. But why? Why now after all this time? And why didn't Lydia ever mention her? People change, core friendships end. It happens. Not like this. He pulled out the photo he'd been carrying in his wallet. Young Lydia and Vivian, arms around each other, faces bright with joy. Look at them. That's not just any friendship. That's something deep. Something real. Beverly studied the photo. They do look close. But that was 25 years ago. Exactly. What happened in those 25 years? Why did they stop being friends? Maybe you should ask yourself why this matters so much to you. The question stopped him. Why did it matter? Was it really about understanding Lydia's past, or was it about something else? Some need to remain central to her story, to not be displaced by ghosts he'd never known existed. She was my wife, he said quietly. I thought I knew her. Now I'm finding out there are whole chapters of her life I knew nothing about. Beverly's expression softened. You knew her core. You knew the woman she became. Maybe this Vivian knew the girl she was. That's not the same thing. The words settled over him, offering a kind of comfort. But they didn't quiet his curiosity. After Beverly left, restless energy drove Corwin back to the attic. He pulled down more boxes, searching for anything that might explain the connection between Lydia and Vivian, and what had torn them apart. In a dusty cardboard box labeled College Misc, he found what he was looking for, a journal. The cover was worn blue leather, the pages yellowed with age. Lydia's handwriting filled every line, the entries dated from her sophomore through junior years. Corwin hesitated. Reading this felt invasive, like rifling through someone's private thoughts. But Lydia was gone, and these pages might hold answers he desperately needed. He opened to a random page, dated September 1998. Vivian and I stayed up until 3 in the morning, talking about everything, our dreams, our fears, the people we want to become. She understands me in ways I can't explain. It's like she can see straight into my soul and isn't frightened by what she finds there. I've never had a friend like this. I don't think I ever will again. The intimacy of the words made Corwin's chest tighten. He flipped forward, reading entry after entry. Vivian appeared on nearly every page, studying together, attending protests, volunteering at homeless shelters. The friendship was woven into every aspect of Lydia's college life. Then he found an entry from November 1999 that made him pause. V's mother died last night. She called me at midnight, barely able to speak through the tears. I drove to her apartment and held her while she cried. We didn't sleep. We just sat together in the darkness, and I tried to be strong for her the way she's always been strong for me. I don't know what I'd do without her. She's not just my friend, she's my family. Corwin read the words twice, feeling the weight of that bond. This wasn't casual friendship. This was the kind of connection that defined a life. He kept reading, following the thread of their relationship through Lydia's junior year. Then abruptly, the entries about Vivian stopped. The last mention was dated March 2000. I can't write about what happened. Not yet, maybe not ever. All I know is that everything is different now. V and I, the entry ended there, the sentence unfinished, as if Lydia couldn't bear to complete the thought. The next entry, 2 weeks later, made no mention of Vivian at all, nor did any entry after that. It was as if Vivian had simply ceased to exist in Lydia's world. What had happened in March 2000? Corwin searched through the box for more clues. He found old letters, concert tickets, a dried flower pressed between sheets of tissue paper. Then tucked in an envelope at the bottom of the box, he found a photograph he hadn't seen before. It showed Lydia and Vivian standing together, but the warmth from earlier photos was gone. They stood stiffly several inches apart, their smiles forced. On the back, Lydia had written a single word: goodbye. The photograph was dated April 2000, 1 month after the last journal entry about Vivian. Corwin held the photo, studying their faces. Whatever had happened between them, it had left visible wounds. The joy and ease of their earlier friendship had been replaced by something painful. Distance, hurt, maybe even betrayal. He thought about the flowers at the grave, the careful note. After all these years, after whatever breach had torn their friendship apart, Vivian was still honoring Lydia's memory. Still visiting, still remembering. That had to mean something. Corwin took the journal and the photograph downstairs. He sat at the kitchen table, reading through the entries again, trying to piece together the story. But Lydia had been too heartbroken or too private to record the details. The answer remained hidden, locked in the past. His phone rang, startling him. Unknown number. His heart raced as he answered, "Hello?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice, soft and uncertain. "Is this Corwin?" "Yes, this is Vivian. I got your note." Corwin's breath caught. After days of waiting, here it was, the voice behind the flowers, the ghost from Lydia's past. "Thank you for calling," he managed. "I almost didn't." Another pause. "I wasn't sure if you'd be angry." "I'm not angry. I'm confused, I understand. I'd like to explain, if you'll let me. But not over the phone." Her voice trembled slightly. "Could we meet? Somewhere neutral?" Corwin thought of Naomi, of the questions this meeting might answer or create. But he'd come too far to turn back now. "There's a coffee shop downtown. Riverside Cafe, do you know it?" "I do. Tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock? I'll be there." A long pause. "Corwin, I want you to know I loved her. I loved Lydia more than almost anyone in my life. What happened between us, it's complicated. But I never stopped caring." The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion and unspoken history. "Tomorrow," Corwin said. "We'll talk tomorrow." After he hung up, he sat in the quiet kitchen, Lydia's journal open before him. 24 hours from now, he would meet the woman his wife had once called her closest friend. He would learn what had torn them apart and why, after decades of silence, Vivian had returned. Outside, the afternoon light faded toward evening. Corwin looked at the photograph of young Lydia and Vivian one more time, at their faces bright with a happiness that hadn't lasted. "What happened to you two?" he whispered. "And why didn't you tell me?" The questions would have to wait until morning. But for the first time in days, Corwin felt like he was moving toward answers instead of just circling in the dark. Corwin barely slept that night. He lay in bed, watching shadows move across the ceiling, his mind constructing and deconstructing scenarios of what tomorrow's meeting might bring. Would Vivian look like her college photos? Would she blame Lydia for whatever had happened between them? Would the answers he sought bring peace or more pain? At breakfast, Naomi studied him with the perceptive eyes of a child who'd learned to read adult moods. "You look worried, Daddy." He forced a smile. "Just thinking about work stuff." "Is it about the flower lady?" Sometimes her insight startled him. "What makes you think that?" "You've been looking at old pictures, and you keep staring at your phone like you're waiting for something. 7 years old, and already too wise for her age." Loss had done that to her, taught her to pay attention, to notice the subtle shifts in the adults around her. "I'm meeting someone today," he said, deciding honesty was better than evasion. "Someone who knew Mommy a long time ago? The one who leaves the flowers?" "I think so, yes." Naomi considered this, stirring her cereal thoughtfully. "Will you tell me about it after?" "I will." "Good." She took a bite, then added, "I'm glad Mommy had other people who loved her. It means she was special." The simple wisdom of it brought a lump to Corwin's throat. Leave it to a child to find the grace in a situation that had left him feeling threatened and uncertain. After dropping Naomi at school, Corwin drove downtown to Riverside Cafe. He arrived 15 minutes early, ordered coffee he didn't want, and claimed a corner table where he could watch the door. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around the warm cup. At precisely 10 o'clock, a woman entered the cafe. She was in her mid-40s, slender, with auburn hair touched with grey at the temples. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a navy sweater, and carried herself with a tentative grace, as if uncertain of her welcome. Her eyes scanned the room, found him, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, yes, but also apprehension. She approached slowly. "Corwin?" "Vivian." They regarded each other for a moment. Up close, he could see the resemblance to her college photos. The same kind eyes, the same gentle curve to her mouth. But age and experience had written themselves across her features in fine lines, and a wariness that spoke of hard-won lessons. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Thank you for calling." An awkward silence settled between them. Vivian ordered tea from a passing server, then turned her attention back to Corwin. Her hands fidgeted with a napkin, folding and refolding it. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "The flowers," Corwin said. "Start with why you've been leaving them." Vivian nodded, seeming to gather herself. "I moved back to town 2 years ago. I'd been living in Seattle for almost 20 years. When I came back, I learned about Lydia's death. I was devastated. I hadn't seen her in so long, hadn't spoken to her, and suddenly she was just gone. You didn't know she was sick." "No, we'd lost touch completely." Pain flickered across her face. "I went to the cemetery to pay my respects, and I just kept going back. At first it was once a month, then every few weeks, eventually every Sunday. It became a ritual, I suppose. A way to maintain a connection I'd lost years ago. Why didn't you reach out while she was alive?" The question hung between them, heavy with accusation. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "Pride, shame, fear, take your pick. What happened between us?" She paused, struggling with the words. "I hurt her, Corwin. I hurt her badly, and I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done. What did you do?" She took a shaky breath. 23 years ago, my mother died. Lydia and I were in our junior year of college. Mum's illness had drained what little money my family had. The medical bills were crushing. I was about to drop out of school because I couldn't afford tuition. Corwin waited, sensing there was more. Lydia offered to help. She'd been working part-time, had some savings. She loaned me $5,000, a fortune to us back then. She insisted it was a gift, but I promised to pay her back. I was so grateful. I thought it would buy me time to finish school, to get on my feet. Vivian's hands twisted the napkin more forcefully now, but things got worse instead of better. I fell into depression after Mom died. My grades slipped. I started making bad decisions. I met someone, a guy who seemed charming at first but turned out to be using me. I loaned him money trying to help, and he disappeared with it. Suddenly I had nothing, and I owed Lydia everything. "She would have understood," Corwin said quietly. "I know that now. But at 21, drowning in grief and shame, I couldn't face her. I avoided her calls, made excuses. Eventually I just disappeared, transferred to another school, moved away, cut all ties. It was easier than admitting what a mess I'd made of my life. The story settled over Corwin like a weight. He thought of Lydia's journal entries, the abrupt end to mentions of Vivian. This was what had caused it. Not betrayal exactly, but abandonment born of shame. "Lydia tried to find you," he said. Vivian looked up sharply. "What?" Corwin pulled out the faded photograph he'd found, the one with "goodbye" written on the back. "I found her college journal, and some letters. She tried to reach out years later. Sent a letter to your childhood home. I never got it," Vivian whispered. "My father moved after Mom died. Sold the house. I never knew." From his jacket pocket, Corwin produced a photocopy he'd made of one of Lydia's journal pages. He debated whether to bring it, but something told him Vivian needed to see it. Vivian took the paper with trembling hands and read aloud, "I miss V every single day. I don't understand what happened, but I hope she's okay. I hope she knows I would have forgiven her anything. She was my sister in every way that mattered." A sob broke from Vivian's throat. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Other patrons glanced their way, but Corwin didn't care. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "She loved you," he said simply. "Whatever happened, she never stopped loving you." "I wasted so much time," Vivian choked out. "So many years I could have had with her. And now she's gone." They sat in silence while Vivian composed herself. The server brought her tea, and she wrapped both hands around the cup as if seeking warmth. "Tell me about her," Vivian said finally. Tell me about the life she had. The woman she became, so Corwin did. He told her about meeting Lydia at an architecture conference 10 years ago, how her laugh had caught his attention across a crowded room. He described their courtship, their wedding, Naomi's birth. He spoke of Lydia's volunteer work at the library, her garden, her kindness to neighbors and strangers alike. She was exactly who she wanted to be, Corwin said. She made the world better just by being in it. Vivian smiled through her tears. That sounds like her. Even in college, she was always volunteering, always trying to help. She had this fierce belief that one person could make a difference. She did make a difference. To so many people, and to you, Vivian said. I can see it in your face when you talk about her. She was deeply loved. She was. She is. Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a photograph, the same one Corwin had found in the attic, showing young Lydia and Vivian with their arms around each other, faces bright with joy. I've kept this all these years, Vivian said. Even when I was too ashamed to reach out, I couldn't let go of this memory. She was the best friend I ever had. Corwin studied the photograph, seeing it now with new understanding. These weren't just college friends. They were young women who had loved each other deeply, who had been family to each other when family failed. I need to tell you something else, Vivian said, her voice steadier now. Something I should have said when I first called. Corwin waited. I've been helping. Financially, I mean. She met his eyes. When I learned about Lydia's death, I also learned about the medical bills. The debt you were carrying. Corwin's chest tightened. What are you talking about? I've been making anonymous payments. $500 a month for the past 2 years. It was the least I could do. The debt I owed Lydia, I could never really repay it, but I could try to ease the burden she'd left behind. The world seemed to tilt. Corwin thought of the mysterious payments he'd assumed were insurance corrections or hospital billing errors. All this time it had been Vivian. You've been paying my bills. His voice came out strangled. I finally got my life together. Good job, financial stability. The money didn't matter to me, not the way it would have mattered to you and Naomi. I hope you're not angry. Angry? Corwin didn't know what he felt. Shock, gratitude, confusion, all of it swirled together. That's over $12,000, he said. $12,200, actually. But who's counting? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. It doesn't even begin to cover what Lydia gave me. Not just the money she loaned me in college, but her friendship, her belief in me. She saw good in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Corwin's eyes burned with unshed tears. For 2 years, he'd been struggling under the weight of medical debt, cutting corners, taking extra work, lying awake worrying about Naomi's future. And all that time, this stranger who loved his wife had been quietly lifting that burden. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what Lydia would have done for me. She would have helped without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. I was just trying to honor her memory in the only way I knew how. Corwin reached across the table and took Vivian's hand. Thank you. I don't know what else to say. Just thank you. They sat like that for a moment, 2 people bound together by love for someone they'd both lost. Can I ask you something? Vivian said. The note you left at the grave, did you think I was some kind of threat? Corwin had the grace to look embarrassed. At first, maybe. I didn't understand. But now I do. You weren't threatening my connection to Lydia. You were honoring your own. I'd like to keep visiting if that's okay with you. It's more than okay. But Vivian, he paused, gathering courage. I'd like you to meet Naomi. I'd like her to know who you are, who you were to her mother. Vivian's eyes widened. Are you sure? Lydia would want it. And I think Naomi would too. She's been curious about the flower lady since the beginning. A genuine smile broke across Vivian's face, the first real one since they'd sat down. I'd love that. I'd be honored. They made plans to meet at the cemetery the following Sunday, all 3 of them. As Corwin stood to leave, Vivian caught his arm. I have one more thing to give you, she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. I found this in my mother's belongings after she died. It arrived after we'd moved, and the post office returned it to sender. But somehow it ended up in Mom's things. I think the address was forwarded, but it all got mixed up. I only found it a few months ago. Corwin took the envelope. The return address was their old house on Sycamore Street. The handwriting was unmistakably Lydia's. She did try to reach you, he said softly. She did. I just wish I'd known. Vivian stood, gathering her things. I'll see you Sunday, Corwin. And thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this, even now. After she left, Corwin sat alone with the envelope. He opened it carefully, unfolding the letter inside. It was dated 15 years ago, 10 years after Vivian and Lydia had lost touch. The letter read, "Dear V, I don't know if this will reach you, but I had to try. I've thought about you so often over the years, wondered where you are and if you're happy. I want you to know that I forgave you a long time ago. Not that there was really anything to forgive. Life is hard and we all do our best. I'm getting married next month to a wonderful man named Corwin. I wish you could be there. You'll always be one of the most important people in my life, no matter how much time passes. If you ever want to reconnect, I'm here. Love always, Lydia." Corwin read the letter 3 times, his heart breaking and healing in equal measure. Lydia had reached out. She'd tried to rebuild the bridge. It wasn't Vivian's fault that the letter never arrived. It was just one of those cruel accidents of timing and circumstance. He folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. On Sunday, he would give it to Vivian. She deserved to know that Lydia had never given up on their friendship. As he drove home, Corwin felt something shift inside him. The mystery of the flowers had led him not to betrayal or secrets, but to grace, to a love that had survived decades of separation, to a friendship that death itself couldn't erase. Lydia's life had been bigger than he'd known, filled with more love and connection than one person could hold. And somehow that made him love her even more. The days between Tuesday and Sunday moved with strange slowness. Corwin found himself thinking constantly about the upcoming meeting, imagining how Naomi would react to Vivian, how Vivian would handle meeting Lydia's daughter for the first time. He told Naomi about the meeting on Wednesday evening after dinner. They sat together on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. "So the flower lady has a name," Naomi said thoughtfully. "Vivian, that's right. And she was Mommy's best friend a long time ago. Why didn't they stay friends?" It was the central question, wasn't it? Sometimes life gets complicated. They lost touch, and by the time they both realized they wanted to reconnect, too much time had passed. That's sad. It is. But Vivian never forgot Mommy. That's why she leaves the flowers. Naomi was quiet for a moment, her small hand finding his. "Is she nice?" "I think so. She seems like someone who cares deeply. Then I want to meet her." Sunday morning arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Corwin dressed carefully, though he couldn't have said why it mattered. Naomi wore her favorite dress, the blue one with white flowers that Lydia had bought her the year before she died. "I want to look nice for Mommy's friend." Naomi explained. They arrived at the cemetery early, and Corwin was surprised to find Vivian already there, kneeling beside Lydia's grave, with fresh white lilies in her hands. She looked up as they approached, and Corwin saw uncertainty flash across her face. "Vivian," he said gently. "This is Naomi." Vivian stood slowly, her eyes filling with tears as she looked at the little girl. "Oh," she breathed. "You have your mother's eyes." Naomi stepped forward with the directness of childhood. "Do you really remember my mommy from when she was young?" "I do. We were best friends." "What was she like?" Vivian smiled through her tears. "She was brave and kind and funny. She made everyone around her feel special. And she had the most beautiful laugh. It sounded like music." "Daddy says that too," Naomi said with satisfaction. As if this confirmed Vivian's credentials, they stood together around the grave, an unlikely trio bound by love for the woman they'd all lost. Corwin placed their usual daisies beside Vivian's lilies, and Naomi added a handful of dandelions she'd picked along the path. "Mommy always said dandelions were wishes," Naomi explained to Vivian. "So I'm giving her wishes." "That's perfect," Vivian said softly. They sat on the grass. Vivian had brought a blanket, as if anticipating they might stay a while. And Vivian began telling stories. She spoke of midnight study sessions and spontaneous road trips, of protests they'd attended together and dreams they'd shared about changing the world. Naomi listened with rapt attention, absorbing these glimpses of a mother she'd never known as a young woman. Corwin found himself equally captivated. These weren't the stories he knew. These were pieces of Lydia that had existed before him, that had shaped the woman he'd loved. "Tell me about the time with the squirrel," Naomi prompted, pointing to a story Vivian had just started. "Oh, the squirrel." Vivian laughed. "Your mother tried to rescue a baby squirrel that had fallen from its nest. She wrapped it in her scarf and tried to feed it with an eyedropper. She named it Professor Nutkins and was convinced she could raise it to adulthood. What happened?" Naomi asked. "The wildlife rescue people explained that squirrels don't make good pets, and your mother reluctantly let them take Professor Nutkins to a rehabilitation center. But she visited him every week for a month, bringing him nuts, until they released him back into the wild." "That sounds like Mommy," Naomi said with a smile. As the morning wore on, Corwin watched the easy rapport developing between Vivian and Naomi. There was something natural about it, as if some part of Lydia's essence connected them across the years. He thought about Beverly's words, that maybe Vivian had known the girl Lydia was, while he'd known the woman she'd become. Together, they held different pieces of the same remarkable person. "Can we show Vivian Mommy's garden?" Naomi asked suddenly. Corwin hesitated, but Vivian's hopeful expression made the decision easy. "We'd love to have you over." At the house, Vivian stood in the garden with something like reverence. She always talked about having a garden someday. "When we were in college, we used to plan it out. What flowers we'd plant, how we'd arrange everything. She planted roses for love," Naomi recited, clearly repeating something Lydia had told her. "And lavender for peace, and black-eyed Susans for happiness." "That sounds exactly like something she'd do," Vivian said. "Giving everything meaning." Inside, Vivian moved through the house with careful steps, taking in the photographs, the books, the small details that marked a life fully lived. She paused at the mantel, studying a photo of Corwin, Lydia, and baby Naomi. "She looks so happy," Vivian whispered. "She was," Corwin said. "We all were." Over lunch, sandwiches and lemonade that Naomi helped prepare, the conversation flowed more easily. Vivian asked about Naomi's school, her friends, her favorite subjects. She told funny stories about Lydia's terrible singing voice and her habit of making up silly songs about everyday tasks. "She used to do that," Naomi exclaimed. "She had a song about folding laundry." "Oh, I remember that one," Vivian laughed. "It goes—" She began singing in a deliberately off-key voice, and Naomi joined in, both of them laughing at the absurdity of Lydia's improvised lyrics. Corwin watched them, feeling something loosen in his chest. For 3 years, he and Naomi had been alone with their grief, circling it like a wound they couldn't quite touch. But Vivian's presence brought something new, not replacement or erasure, but expansion. Their small circle of memory was growing, and with it came new life, new laughter. After lunch, Vivian pulled out a small album she'd brought. "I thought you might like to see these," she said to Naomi. "Pictures of your mother when she was in college." They spent the next hour going through the photos, Vivian providing commentary for each one. There was Lydia with blue streaks in her hair, Lydia dressed as a pirate for Halloween, Lydia sleeping in the library with books piled around her. "She looks funny," Naomi giggled at one particularly goofy photo. "She was funny," Vivian said. "She could always make people laugh, even in difficult times." As the afternoon wore on, Naomi eventually wandered off to play in her room, leaving Corwin and Vivian alone in the living room. "Thank you for this," Vivian said quietly, "for letting me in. I know it can't be easy." "It's been easier than I expected," Corwin admitted. "Naomi needs more than just me and my grief. She needs to know all the parts of her mother, including the parts I never knew. She's a remarkable child." "She is." Lydia would be so proud of her. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Vivian said, "I have something else to tell you. Something I should have mentioned before, but I wanted to meet Naomi first, to see if this was real. Corwin felt a flutter of concern. "What is it?" "I'd like to keep helping. Not just financially, though. I hope you'll let me continue with that. But in other ways, I could babysit sometimes, give you a break, or help with homework, or just be another adult in Naomi's life who loved her mother." The offer caught Corwin off guard. He'd expected the Sunday visits to continue, maybe occasional coffee meetings. But this was something more, a sustained presence, a genuine relationship. "You'd want that?" he asked. "I'd be honored. I can't have the friendship with Lydia that I lost. But maybe I can have a connection with her daughter. Maybe I can be the aunt Naomi never had." Corwin thought about Beverly, who did her best, but was stretched thin with her own family. He thought about Naomi's questions about her mother, questions that would only multiply as she grew older. And he thought about Vivian's face as she'd told stories that morning, the way she'd come alive, as if part of her had been dormant and was finally waking. "I think Lydia would love that," he said. "And I think Naomi would too." Vivian's smile was radiant. "Really? Really? But you should know, we're a package deal. If you're going to be part of Naomi's life, you're part of mine too." "I'd like that," Vivian said softly. "After all these years of being alone, I'd really like that." When Vivian left that evening, she hugged Naomi tight and promised to come back the following weekend. Naomi waved from the porch until Vivian's car disappeared around the corner. "I like her, Daddy," Naomi said. "She makes Mommy feel close." "She does, doesn't she?" That night, after Naomi was asleep, Corwin sat on the porch with Lydia's old journal in his lap. He opened to one of the entries about Vivian, reading the words with new understanding. "Vi isn't just my friend. She's my family. She's the person who knows all of me, the good parts and the broken parts, and loves me anyway. I don't know what I'd do without her." Corwin closed the journal and looked up at the stars. "She's back, Lydia," he whispered. "Your friend is back. And she's helping us remember you." The night was quiet, but somewhere in that silence, Corwin felt a sense of rightness, as if pieces were finally falling into place. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm Corwin hadn't experienced in years, a sense of life expanding rather than contracting. Vivian became a regular presence in their lives, stopping by on Wednesday evenings to help Naomi with homework and joining. Then for Sunday cemetery visits, followed by brunch at a small diner near the church. Beverly noticed the change. "Immediately. You seem lighter," she said one Saturday when she stopped by with groceries. She found Corwin in the kitchen, actually humming as he prepared dinner. "What's gotten into you?" "Nothing. Just a good week." Beverly leaned against the counter, studying him with the shrewd perception of an older sister. "This is about that Vivian woman, isn't it?" Corwin set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. "She's been helpful. With Naomi especially. It's nice to have another adult around who understands what Lydia meant to us." "Uh-huh." Beverly's tone was neutral, but her eyes were sharp. "Just be careful, Cor." "Careful of what?" "Of confusing gratitude with something else." The implication hung in the air. Corwin felt heat rise to his face. "It's not like that. Vivian was Lydia's friend. She's helping us honor her memory. I know. I'm just saying grief can be complicated, and loneliness even more so." After Beverly left, Corwin found himself thinking about her words. Was he developing feelings for Vivian? He examined his emotions carefully, like turning over stones, to see what lived beneath. There was gratitude, certainly, and appreciation for how good she was with Naomi, but was there something more? He pushed the thought away. It was too soon, too complicated. Vivian was Lydia's friend, a connection to his wife's past. That's all it could be. On Wednesday evening, Vivian arrived with a large box tucked under her arm. "What's that?" Naomi asked, immediately curious. "Something I thought you might like to see." Vivian set the box on the dining room table and opened it carefully. Inside were more photo albums, letters, small mementos from her college years with Lydia. "I've been going through my storage unit," she explained. "Turns out I kept more than I realized." They spent the evening sorting through memories. There were concert tickets from shows Lydia and Vivian had attended together, dried flowers pressed between book pages, funny greeting cards they'd exchanged. Each item told a story, and Vivian shared them all with Naomi's eager participation, but there was one envelope she hesitated over. Corwin noticed her fingers trembling slightly as she picked it up, then set it down again. "What's in that one?" he asked gently. Vivian met his eyes. "A letter I never sent. Written a long time ago after everything fell apart between us. Can we read it?" Naomi asked innocently. Vivian looked to Corwin, who nodded. "If you're comfortable sharing it." She opened the envelope and pulled out several pages, yellowed with age and covered in her handwriting. Her voice shook as she began to read. "Dear Lydia, I don't know if you'll ever see this letter. Part of me hopes you won't, because it means facing how badly I failed you. I've started this letter 100 times, and I can never find the right words. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. I was drowning, and instead of reaching for the life preserver you threw me, I dragged you down with me. The money was never really about the money. It was about my inability to accept help, to accept love, to believe I deserved either. You saw the best in me, and I couldn't stand the weight of that vision. So I ran. I ran from your kindness because I didn't know how to live up to it. I ran from your friendship because I didn't believe I deserved it. And now I'm alone, and it's exactly what I earned. I hope you're happy, Lydia. I hope you found someone who appreciates how extraordinary you are. I hope you're building the beautiful life we used to talk about. And I hope—" Vivian's voice broke. She paused, gathering herself. "I hope someday you can forgive me for not being strong enough to stay." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Naomi had tears in her eyes, though Corwin doubted she understood all the nuances of what she'd heard. "Why didn't you send it?" Corwin asked softly. "Because I was still a coward. It's one thing to write the truth, another to actually share it. By the time I had the courage, I'd lost track of where Lydia was. And then more years passed, and it seemed too late." Corwin reached across the table and took the letter from her hands. He read it himself, seeing the raw pain in every line, the self-recrimination, the profound loss. "She forgave you," he said. "You know that, right? The letter I showed you at the cafe, she'd already forgiven you years before she died. I know. But that almost makes it worse. All those years I wasted, convinced I was unforgivable." Naomi, with the directness of childhood, said, "But you're here now. Isn't that what matters?" From the mouths of babes, Corwin thought. "She's right, you know. You can't change the past, but you're here now. For both of us." Vivian wiped her eyes. "Thank you. Both of you, for letting me be here." That night, after Vivian had gone home and Naomi was asleep, Corwin found himself in the attic again. He pulled down the box containing Lydia's college things and searched until he found what he was looking for. An envelope he'd noticed before but hadn't opened. Inside was a letter in Lydia's handwriting, addressed to Corwin but never given to him. The date was from just weeks before her death, written in the hospital during one of her clearer days. His hands shook as he unfolded the pages. "My dearest Corwin, I'm writing this because there are things I need to say while I still can. Things I might not have the strength or clarity to say later. First, know that loving you and building a life with you has been my greatest joy. You and Naomi are everything to me. But I need to tell you about someone else who was important to me, someone I've never properly talked about. Her name was Vivian. In college, she was my best friend, my chosen sister, the person who knew me better than anyone. We lost touch due to circumstances too painful and complicated to fully explain, but I never stopped missing her. If you're reading this after I'm gone, I want you to know something. Don't let grief make you isolate yourself. Don't let fear of forgetting me keep you from living. You're young enough to find love again, to build new connections, to create new joy. That's not betrayal, it's life. And if by some miracle Vivian ever finds her way back into your world, please be kind to her. She was broken when I knew her, carrying burdens I couldn't help her with. But she had the biggest heart, and she deserved so much better than what life gave her. I hope she found peace. I hope she found healing. And if you meet her, tell her I forgave her long ago. Tell her I missed her every day. Tell her she was loved. This isn't goodbye, my love. I'll always be with you and Naomi in every memory, every laugh, every moment of joy you find. Don't mourn me so hard that you forget to live. Promise me that. Promise me you'll find happiness again. All my love, always, Lydia. Corwin read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Lydia had known. She'd anticipated this somehow. The possibility that Vivian might return, that Corwin might need someone else in his life. She'd given him permission, given him blessing. The next morning, he showed the letter to Beverly. She read it in silence, her expression softening. "Well," she said finally, "I guess I was wrong to worry. What do you mean?" Lydia knew you'd need help moving forward. She knew you'd need connection. If she wanted Vivian in your life, Beverly paused, choosing her words carefully. "Then who am I to question it?" "It's not like that," Corwin protested, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. Beverly gave him a knowing look. "Maybe not yet. But Cor, you're allowed to live. You're allowed to find joy again. Lydia clearly wanted that for you." That Sunday, Corwin brought the letter to the cemetery. The 3 of them, Corwin, Naomi, and Vivian, stood around Lydia's grave as he read it aloud. When he finished, Vivian was openly weeping. "She was so much better than I deserved," Vivian said. "She loved you," Corwin said simply. "That's what matters." They stood together in silence, bound by their shared love for Lydia and the strange grace that had brought them together. The white lilies and daisies bloomed side by side in the vase, different but complementary, just like the relationship developing between them. As they left the cemetery that day, Naomi walked between them, holding both their hands. To any observer, they might have looked like a family, and in a way, Corwin realized, they were becoming one, not replacing what had been lost, but building something new on the foundation of shared love and memory. That night, Corwin placed Lydia's letter in the wooden box with her wedding ring. 2 artifacts of her life, 2 messages about love. The ring represented the love they'd shared. The letter represented her blessing on whatever love might come next. He wasn't ready to open his heart fully, not yet, but he was beginning to understand that maybe, someday, he could be. And that Lydia, in her wisdom and grace, had known he would need that permission. 3 months after their first meeting, Corwin's life had settled into a new normalcy. Vivian was no longer a mystery, but a fixture. The woman who showed up for Naomi's school play, who helped with science fair projects, who joined them for family dinners twice a week. To Naomi, she was Aunt Vivian, a title that had emerged naturally and felt right to everyone. But there was still something Vivian hadn't fully explained. Corwin had noticed the way she sometimes hesitated when talk turned to her current life, the careful vagueness about her work, the apartment she mentioned but never invited them to visit. On a Thursday afternoon, Corwin received an unexpected call from a hospital billing department. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm calling about the outstanding balance on your account." Corwin's stomach tightened. He'd been managing the medical debt carefully, making minimum payments, but it was still crushing. "Yes, we wanted to inform you that your account has been paid in full as of this morning. A final payment of $14,300 was processed through our automated system." The world seemed to tilt. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your account is now at 0 balance. You should receive written confirmation in the mail within 5 business days." After the call ended, Corwin sat staring at his phone. $14,000. That was more than half of what he still owed. Combined with the monthly payments he'd been assuming were billing corrections, it meant someone had paid nearly $30,000 toward his medical debt. Someone, but he knew exactly who. That evening, after Naomi was in bed, Corwin called Vivian. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. A pause. "What's wrong?" The hospital called. "My account is paid off." Silence on the other end. "Vivian, you can't do this. You can't just pay my debts without telling me. Can we talk in person?" Her voice was small, almost frightened. "Please?" She arrived 20 minutes later. Corwin met her at the door, and the guilt on her face confirmed everything. They sat in the living room, the space between them thick with tension. "How long?" Corwin asked. "How long have you been making these payments?" "Since I came back to town." "Since I learned about Lydia's death and the bills she'd left behind. That's over 2 years. How much have you paid in total?" Vivian looked at her hands. $29,400. The number hit him like a physical blow. That's a small fortune, Vivian. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't about recognition or gratitude. It was about making amends the only way I knew how. Corwin stood, pacing the room. This is too much. Way too much, is it? Vivian's voice gained strength. She loaned me $5,000 when I desperately needed it. I never paid her back. This doesn't even begin to cover the interest over all these years. That's not how friendship works. She never expected. I know she didn't expect it. That's what made it worse. She gave without expecting anything, and I took without ever giving back. Corwin stopped pacing. So this is about you. About easing your guilt. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but he saw them land. Vivian flinched as if struck. Maybe, she admitted quietly. Maybe it started that way. But Corwin, I watched you struggle. I saw you working extra hours, saw the worry lines deepen around your eyes. I saw Naomi wearing shoes that were too small because you were stretching every dollar. And I had the means to help. You should have told me. Would you have accepted it if I had? The question hung between them. Corwin wanted to say yes, but honesty stopped him. He wouldn't have accepted it. Pride would have gotten in the way, just as it had gotten in Vivian's way all those years ago. That's not the point, he said weakly, isn't it? Vivian stood facing him. You're angry because I took away your right to refuse. I understand that, but I couldn't watch Lydia's family suffer when I had the power to help. How did you even afford this? $29,000. I have a good job. Software development. I got lucky with stock options from a startup that went public. The money means nothing to me compared to what Lydia gave me. Corwin sank back onto the couch, his anger deflating into something more complicated. I don't know how to feel about this. Vivian sat beside him, careful to maintain distance. Then don't feel anything right now. Just know that I did it because I care about you and Naomi. Not just because of Lydia, though that's part of it, but because you matter to me. Both of you. The words settled over him, heavy with meaning beyond their surface. Corwin looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he'd been trying not to acknowledge. The way her eyes softened when she looked at him. The gentle care in every gesture. The way she'd woven herself into their lives, not as a ghost from the past, but as a presence in the present. Vivian, he said carefully, what are we doing here? She understood the real question beneath his words. I don't know. I didn't plan any of this. I came back to honor Lydia's memory, and instead I found... She paused, searching for words. I found a life I didn't know I wanted. A family I didn't think I deserved. I'm not ready for this. For anything beyond friendship, I know. And I'm not asking for more. But I need you to understand. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, I'm here. They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings filling the space between them. Finally, Corwin said, no more secret payments. If you want to help, we talk about it first. Agreed, agreed. And Vivian, thank you. I'm angry that you did this without telling me, but I'm also... His voice caught. I'm so grateful. You've given us breathing room I didn't think we'd ever have. She reached over and took his hand, the gesture simple and warm. That's all I wanted. For you and Naomi to have some peace. After she left, Corwin sat alone in the dark living room. He thought about the money, about Vivian's sacrifice, about the complicated tangle of gratitude, obligation, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. He went to the bedroom and opened the wooden box on his nightstand. Lydia's ring gleamed in the dim light. Beside it lay her letter, the one giving him permission to move forward. Is this what you meant? He whispered. Is this what you wanted for me? The ring offered no answer, but somehow Corwin felt a sense of rightness settling over him. Vivian wasn't replacing Lydia. She was her own person, carrying her own history, her own pain and joy. But she fit into their lives in a way that felt natural, inevitable even. He wasn't ready to fall in love. But he was beginning to understand that he might be ready to let himself be loved. And maybe that was enough for now. The next day he took Naomi aside. You know how Aunt Vivian has been helping us? Uh-huh. She did something very generous. She helped pay for some of the bills from when Mommy was sick. Naomi's eyes widened. Really, that's a lot of money. It is. And I want you to understand how special that is. Not everyone would do something like that, because she loved Mommy. Yes, and because she loves us too. Naomi considered this with her usual thoughtfulness. Does that mean she's really family now? Not just pretend family? Corwin pulled his daughter close. I think so, sweetheart. If that's okay with you. It's more than okay, Daddy. I think Mommy would be happy out of the mouths of babes, Corwin thought again. His 7-year-old daughter understood grace better than he did. That Sunday, the three of them stood at Lydia's grave together. Corwin had brought something special, a photograph of all three of them from Naomi's recent birthday party, all smiling, all genuinely happy. I want to leave this here, he said, so Mommy can see how we're doing. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? I'm sure. This is our family now. All of us, including Lydia, the past and the present together. They placed the photo beside the flowers, secured in a weatherproof frame. In the picture, Naomi stood between Corwin and Vivian, her arms around both of them, her smile radiant. It captured something true, not a replacement for what had been lost, but an acknowledgement of what was being built. As they left the cemetery, Naomi took both their hands again. Can we get ice cream? Absolutely, Vivian said, with sprinkles. Is there any other way? Corwin watched them banter, feeling something unlock in his chest. The weight he'd been carrying for 3 years wasn't gone, but it had shifted. He wasn't alone anymore. Neither was Naomi. They had Vivian, this unexpected gift from Lydia's past, who had somehow become essential to their future. The mystery of the white lilies had led him here, to acceptance, to healing, to the possibility of joy again. And though the journey wasn't finished, Corwin finally felt like he was walking towards something, rather than just away from loss. 6 months after the revelation about the payments, autumn arrived with its familiar palette of gold and crimson. Corwin stood in his kitchen, watching through the window as Vivian taught Naomi how to rake leaves into piles to jump in. Their laughter drifted through the glass, and he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee in his hands. Beverly had been right, though he'd never admit it out loud. His feelings for Vivian had deepened beyond gratitude or friendship. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, her quiet laugh, the gentle strength in how she handled Naomi's questions about death and memory. But acknowledging those feelings meant confronting them, and Corwin wasn't sure he was ready. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He opened it to find a delivery person with a registered letter. The return address made his stomach drop. It was from Lydia's old law firm, where she'd worked before Naomi's birth. Inside was a formal letter and a sealed envelope. Dear Mr. Hartwell, during our recent office renovation, we discovered a personal item belonging to your late wife in our secure storage. The attached letter was placed there with instructions to be delivered to you on a specific date. That date has now passed, and we apologize for the delay in getting this to you. Please accept our condolences again for your loss. The sealed envelope was addressed in Lydia's handwriting, to Corwin, to be opened 3 years after my death. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter inside was dated from the week before Lydia died, written during one of her final lucid periods. My dearest Corwin, if you're reading this, I've been gone for 3 years. I chose this timeline carefully, believing that 3 years would give you time to grieve properly, to find your footing as a single parent, to remember how to breathe without me. By now, I hope you've begun to heal. I hope you've let yourself laugh without guilt and think about the future without pain. I'm writing this to tell you something I never had the courage to say directly. I want you to find love again. Not to replace what we had, nothing ever could. But to build something new, something different, something equally beautiful. You deserve partnership, companionship, someone to share the weight of raising our daughter. Don't let loyalty to my memory become a prison. I loved you too much to want you trapped in the past. And if, by some miracle I barely dare hope for, Vivian has found her way back into your life, I want you to know something. She was the best friend I ever had. She knew me before you did, in ways you couldn't, through struggles that shaped who I became. I hope time and life have been kind to her. I hope she's found the healing she desperately needed. And if somehow your paths have crossed, don't resist it out of misplaced loyalty to me. She would be good for you and for Naomi. She understands loss. She knows how to be gentle with broken things. Trust what you feel, my love. Trust that loving someone new isn't betraying me. It's honoring the life I wanted you to have. Be happy, Corwin. Choose joy. Choose life. Choose love if it's offered. That's all I ever wanted for you. Forever yours, Lydia. Corwin read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Outside, Vivian and Naomi were still playing, oblivious to the earthquake happening in his chest. Lydia had known. Somehow she'd known or hoped or wished that Vivian would return. And she'd given him explicit permission. No, more than permission. She'd given him her blessing, her encouragement, her loving push toward the future. He walked outside, the letter still in his hand. Vivian looked up from the leaf pile and immediately saw his face. What's wrong? He couldn't speak, just handed her the letter. She read it standing there with Naomi building a leaf fort nearby. When she finished, her face was wet with tears. She knew, Vivian whispered. She hoped we'd find each other. She did. They stood facing each other, 3 feet apart, but connected by something far stronger than proximity. Years of grief, guilt, and fear stood between them. But so did Lydia's love, her wisdom, her generous heart that wanted happiness for the people she'd loved most. Corwin, Vivian said softly, I need to tell you something I've been too scared to say. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She took a breath. I love you. Not because you were Lydia's husband, though that's how we met. Not because I'm trying to recapture something from the past. But because you're kind and patient and the best father I've ever seen. Because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you and Naomi, I feel like I've finally found my way home. Corwin's heart pounded. Vivian, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens next, you should know you're loved. He looked at her, this woman who'd been a mystery, then a ghost from the past, then a friend, and now something infinitely more precious. He thought about Lydia's letter, her explicit blessing. He thought about the last 3 years of grief and the slow, painful process of learning to live again. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and exactly right. I've been fighting it, feeling guilty about it, but I do. I love you. The space between them evaporated. They moved together, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home and setting sail at the same time. The kiss was gentle, reverent, acknowledging all they'd lost and all they'd found. Ew! Naomi's voice broke through. Are you kissing? They pulled apart, laughing through tears. Naomi stood with her hands on her hips, a perfect imitation of Beverly when she was being stern. Maybe, Corwin said. How do you feel about that? Naomi considered seriously. I think it's okay. Aunt Vivian makes you happy. And Mommy would want you to be happy, out of the mouths of babes. Again and always, his daughter understood grace better than anyone. That evening, after Naomi was asleep, Corwin and Vivian sat on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. But I know I don't want to do it without you. No more running away. No more running away, he promised. For either of us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere Corwin imagined Lydia was smiling. She'd given him so much in life. Love, partnership, a beautiful daughter. And even in death, she'd given him one more gift. Permission to love again, and the perfect person to love. The white lilies had been the beginning. But this was the continuation of a story that death couldn't end, only transform. Lydia's love had brought them together. Now their own love would carry them forward. Thanksgiving arrived with an invitation that made Corwin's stomach flutter with nerves. Beverly was hosting the family dinner, and she'd insisted he bring Vivian. It's time everyone met her properly, Beverly had said. Not as Lydia's old friend, but as part of your life. Part of our family. The morning of Thanksgiving, Corwin woke early to find Naomi already dressed in her nicest outfit, a burgundy dress that Beverly had bought her the previous week. "I want to look special," Naomi explained. "For Aunt Vivian's first real family dinner," the phrase struck him, first real family dinner, as if all the meals they'd shared before had been rehearsals. And this was opening night. Vivian arrived at noon, carrying a homemade apple pie and wearing a simple green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. She looked nervous, her fingers fidgeting with her car keys. "You okay?" Corwin asked as she stepped inside. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if they don't accept me? What if they think I'm trying to replace Lydia?" "They won't, and you're not." He took her hand. "You're just being yourself. That's enough." Beverly's house was already full when they arrived. Extended family crowded the living room. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all the connections that made up the fabric of Corwin's life. The conversation paused when they entered, all eyes turning to Vivian. Beverly stepped forward, taking charge as always. "Everyone, this is Vivian Sterling. She was Lydia's best friend from college, and she's become very important to Corwin and Naomi." The phrasing was diplomatic, leaving room for people to draw their own conclusions. Corwin appreciated his sister's tact. The initial awkwardness gave way to Beverly's excellent hosting. She kept conversation flowing, made sure Vivian was included, and gently steered around any potentially uncomfortable topics. By the time they sat down to dinner, the tension had eased considerably. Naomi claimed the seat next to Vivian, her small hand reaching over to squeeze Vivian's under the table. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by the other family members. During dinner, Corwin's Aunt Pauline, Beverly's mother-in-law, known for her directness, asked the question everyone was thinking. "So, Vivian, how did you and Lydia lose touch, if you were such good friends?" The table went quiet. Vivian set down her fork carefully. "I made mistakes," she said honestly. "I was young and struggling, and instead of accepting Lydia's help with grace, I ran from it. By the time I realized what I'd lost, too many years had passed. But you came back," Aunt Pauline observed. "I did. Too late to tell Lydia I was sorry, but not too late to honor her memory by caring for her family." The simple honesty of it seemed to satisfy the older woman. She nodded and returned to her meal, and the conversation moved on. After dinner, while others were having coffee and pie, Naomi disappeared upstairs. She returned carrying a decorated shoebox. "Aunt Vivian, I want to show you something." They moved to a quieter corner of the living room. Naomi opened the box reverently. Inside were treasures, photographs of Lydia, pressed flowers from cemetery visits, drawings Naomi had made, small mementos that meant everything to a child trying to hold on to fading memories. "This is my memory box," Naomi explained. "It's how I keep Mommy close." Vivian's eyes filled with tears as Naomi showed her each item, explaining its significance. A birthday card Lydia had written, a smooth stone from their last beach trip, a hair ribbon Lydia had worn. Then Naomi pulled out a fresh drawing and placed it in the box. It showed 4 figures, a woman with angel wings floating above 3 people holding hands. The caption read, "My family, Mommy in heaven, Daddy, me, and Aunt Vivian on earth. Is it okay?" Naomi asked, suddenly uncertain. "That you're in my family picture?" Vivian pulled Naomi into a fierce hug. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's the greatest honor of my life." Corwin watched from across the room, his heart so full it ached. This was it, the moment when past and present merged completely, when Vivian stopped being a visitor in their lives and became permanent family. Beverly appeared beside him, following his gaze. "She's good for both of you." "She is. Lydia would approve, you know. She always wanted you to be happy, I know. She told me so herself." As evening approached and family began leaving, Corwin found himself standing with Vivian on Beverly's back porch. Through the window, they could see Naomi showing her memory box to cousins, animatedly explaining each item. "Thank you," Vivian said softly. "For what?" "For letting me in. For giving me a second chance at family." At love, Corwin took her hand. "I have something to ask you. Something important." She turned to face him, moonlight catching in her eyes. "Move in with us. Not right away. We'll take it slow. But I don't want this to be temporary. I want you to be part of our daily life, not just our weekends. Corwin, you already are part of it, really. Your toothbrush is in our bathroom. Your favorite coffee is in our cupboard. Naomi asks for you when you're not there. We're already a family in everything but name. Vivian's smile was brilliant. Yes, I'll move in. Whenever you're ready. He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a promise of all the tomorrows they'd build together. Inside, Beverly called them for family photos. The photographer, a cousin with a good camera, arranged everyone in the living room. Squeeze in everyone. There was a moment of hesitation about where Vivian should stand. Then Naomi solved it by grabbing Vivian's hand and pulling her to stand between herself and Corwin. The flash captured them, Corwin with his arm around Vivian, Naomi beaming between them, all three connected by love and loss and the grace to begin again. Spring arrived with warmth and renewal. It had been 1 year since Corwin first discovered the white lilies, 1 year since mystery had transformed into blessing. Today marked another milestone, the installation of a special memorial at Lydia's grave. Corwin had commissioned a granite bench to be placed near the headstone, a permanent spot where visitors could sit and remember. The inscription had taken weeks to finalize, but he'd finally found the right words. Remembered in love, honored in life. Below that, in memory of Lydia, beloved by many, forgotten by none. Vivian and Naomi stood beside him as the stoneworkers finished the installation. The bench was beautiful, smooth grey granite with gentle curves, positioned to face the headstone while offering a view of the surrounding trees. It's perfect. Daddy, Naomi said. Several others had come for the informal dedication. Beverly, of course, and Mrs. Howell from their neighborhood. Patricia from the library where Lydia had volunteered. A small gathering of people whose lives Lydia had touched. When the workers finished, Corwin stepped forward. He'd prepared a few words, written and rewritten them a dozen times. Now standing before the people who'd loved his wife, the prepared speech felt inadequate. He spoke from his heart instead. Lydia taught me that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms, it evolves. It finds new ways to express itself. This bench represents that truth. It's not just a place to mourn. It's a place to remember with joy, to feel close to someone we miss, to honor a life that meant everything to us. His voice caught, and Vivian's hand found his, squeezing gently. Vivian brought Lydia's memory back to life for us in ways I didn't know were possible. She reminded me that Lydia wasn't just my wife or Naomi's mother. She was a friend, a volunteer, a woman who touched countless lives. This bench is for everyone who loved her, everyone who still carries her in their hearts. One by one, the others shared brief memories. Beverly spoke of her sister-in-law's terrible cooking attempts and infectious laughter. Patricia described how Lydia had single-handedly organized the library's reading program for underprivileged children. Mrs. Howell told a story about Lydia, helping her plant a garden after her husband died. Then Vivian stepped forward. Lydia was my first real friend. She taught me what it meant to be loved unconditionally, to be accepted with all my flaws and failures. I lost my way for a long time, but she led me home even after death. She gave me Corwin and Naomi, this new family I never thought I'd deserve. And she taught me that forgiveness, both giving it and accepting it, is the greatest gift we can offer each other. Naomi tugged on Vivian's sleeve. Can I say something? Of course, sweetheart. Naomi's voice was small but clear. Mommy told me once that when we love people, they never really leave us. They live in our hearts and in our memories. I think she's happy that Aunt Vivian found us. I think she wanted us all to be together. The simplicity and wisdom of it brought tears to more than one pair of eyes. After the others left, just the three of them remained. They sat together on the new bench, Naomi between Corwin and Vivian. It feels right, Vivian said quietly. Being here, all of us together. Corwin had been waiting for this moment, for this perfect convergence of past and future. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Vivian, I need to tell you something. She looked at him, eyes widening as she recognized what he was holding. I'm not asking you to replace Lydia. No one ever could, and I wouldn't want you to try. But I'm asking you to build something new with me, To be my partner, Naomi's mother, part of this family not as a guest but as a permanent member. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a single diamond, different from Lydia's ring. Because this was a different love, a different promise. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Vivian's face. Yes, God, yes! Naomi bounced with excitement. Does this mean Aunt Vivian will really be my mom? If that's okay with you, Vivian said, her voice shaking, it's perfect. I'll have a mom in heaven and a mom here with me. Corwin slipped the ring onto Vivian's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They kissed, gentle and sweet, while Naomi giggled and made exaggerated gagging sounds that couldn't quite hide her joy. They sat together on the bench as the afternoon sun painted everything golden. In front of them, Lydia's headstone stood peaceful and dignified, surrounded by flowers, white lilies from Vivian, daisies from Corwin, wildflowers from Naomi. Thank you, Corwin said softly to the stone, to the memory, to the woman who'd loved him enough to set him free. Thank you for everything. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of spring flowers and new beginnings. 3 people sat together, bound by loss and love, by grief transformed into grace, by a woman's generous heart that had blessed them all. The mystery of the white lilies had ended, but the story they'd started was just beginning. 1 year later, the house on Sycamore Street hummed with life, in a way it hadn't since before Lydia's death. Vivian's belongings had merged seamlessly with their own, her books on the shelves, her coffee mug hanging in the kitchen, her laughter filling the rooms that had been too quiet for too long. They'd married quietly in the spring, a small ceremony at Beverly's house with just close family present. Naomi had served as flower girl and seemed to grow 3 inches taller with pride. The wedding photos now sat on the mantel alongside the older ones of Corwin and Lydia. 2 love stories, both precious, both real. On this particular Sunday morning, the 3 of them prepared for their weekly ritual. The cemetery visits had continued, though their nature had changed. They weren't pilgrimages of grief anymore, but gentle remembrances, ways of keeping Lydia present in their evolving life. Don't forget the flowers, Naomi called from the car. Already buckled in, Corwin grabbed the mixed bouquet from the counter. Lilies, daisies, and now roses from the garden Vivian had helped restore. The 3 types of flowers together symbolized their blended family, each one important, each one contributing to the whole. At the cemetery, they found the bench Corwin had commissioned already occupied. An elderly couple sat there, the woman crying quietly while the man held her hand. They stood as Corwin, Vivian, and Naomi approached. We're sorry, the man said. We can move. Please don't, Corwin said warmly. That's why it's here. So anyone who needs a place to sit and remember can do so. The woman smiled through her tears. Thank you. Your wife must have been special. She was, Corwin said. She still is. After the couple left, the 3 of them arranged the flowers and sat together on their bench. It had become a gathering place, just as Corwin had hoped. He'd seen other mourners using it, finding comfort in its simple presence. I have news, Vivian said, her hand finding Corwin's. I wasn't sure when to tell you, but this feels like the right moment. Something in her tone made Corwin's heart skip. What kind of news? The best kind. She placed his hand on her stomach, which showed the faintest curve beneath her shirt. We're having a baby. The world seemed to hold its breath. Corwin stared at her, joy and fear and wonder cascading through him. Really? Really, I'm 3 months along. I wanted to wait until I was sure. Naomi looked between them, confusion giving way to understanding. I'm going to have a brother or sister? You are, Vivian said, pulling her close. Naomi's face split into the biggest smile Corwin had ever seen. Did you hear that, Mommy? She said to the headstone. I'm going to be a big sister. The innocence of it, the way Naomi still included Lydia in every important moment, brought tears to Corwin's eyes. He pulled both Vivian and Naomi into an embrace. The 3 of them, soon to be 4, holding each other beside the grave of the woman who'd made it all possible. She'd be so happy, Corwin whispered. I know, Vivian said. I can feel it. Later that afternoon, back at home, Vivian brought out something she'd been working on, a framed piece she'd commissioned from a local artist. It contained 3 photographs, arranged chronologically. The first showed young Lydia and Vivian in college, arms around each other, faces bright with joy and possibility. The second was from Corwin and Lydia's wedding, the two of them radiant, beginning their life together. The third was recent, Corwin, Vivian and Naomi at Thanksgiving, all of them genuinely happy, genuinely family. Below the photos, the artist had inscribed, "Love endures, love evolves. Love remains." For the living room, Vivian explained. "So we never forget where we came from or how we got here." They hung it on the wall that evening, right where everyone who entered could see it. Past, present, and future united in a single frame. That night, after Naomi was asleep, Corwin and Vivian sat on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting gently on the small swell of her stomach. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also more hopeful than I've been in years." "Me too." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Lydia knew?" "Somehow." Corwin thought about the letters, the careful timing of their delivery, the way Lydia had orchestrated so much, even from beyond death. "I think she hoped, and I think she'd be proud of us, for choosing to live, for choosing to love, again and again, despite the risk, despite the pain we know loss can bring." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside, Naomi slept peacefully. Beside them, the empty swing moved gently in the breeze, as if an invisible presence sat there, keeping watch. Corwin thought about the journey that had brought them here, from those first mysterious white lilies to this moment of complete peace. He'd started as a man frozen in grief, unable to imagine a future beyond loss. Now he sat with a wife he loved, a daughter who was thriving, and a new life growing that would bind them all together. "Thank you," he said softly, speaking to Lydia, though she wasn't there. Or maybe she was. In the flowers they tended, in Naomi's laugh, in the generous space she'd made for others to love what she'd loved. Vivian squeezed his hand, understanding who he was talking to. "Thank you," she echoed, "for bringing us together." The night deepened around them, full of promise and possibility. In the living room, the 3 photograph display caught the lamplight. Past, present, and future woven together by love that refused to end, only transform. The white lilies had been a mystery that needed solving. But the answer had been there all along, written in Lydia's letters, preserved in her generous heart, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Love doesn't end with death. It evolves, expands, and finds new vessels to fill. Lydia's love for Corwin had blessed his future. Her love for Vivian had offered redemption. Her love for Naomi had ensured her daughter would never lack for maternal care. And somehow, impossibly, all of that love had brought 3 broken people together and made them whole. Corwin stood, pulling Vivian to her feet. "Come on, let's go to bed." "In a minute." She walked to the mantel, touching the frame with the 3 photographs. "I just want to look at this one more time." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his hands settling over their growing child. Together, they studied the progression of images: friendship, marriage, family. 3 different configurations of love, all connected by one remarkable woman. "She lives on," Vivian whispered. "In all of us." "She does," Corwin agreed. "And she always will." They turned off the lights and headed upstairs, passing Naomi's room where their daughter slept peacefully, clutching the stuffed rabbit Lydia had given her years ago. In the morning, they would tell Beverly about the baby. They would plan and prepare and worry and hope, the way all parents do. But tonight, they simply existed in this perfect moment of grace. 2 people who'd found each other through loss, who'd chosen to honor the past by building a future, who'd learned that the human heart has infinite capacity for love, if only we're brave enough to let it grow. Outside, the moon rose over the quiet neighborhood. In the cemetery on Maple Hill, white lilies bloomed beside daisies in a stone vase, tended by love that would never fade. On a granite bench, the inscription caught the moonlight: "Remembered in love, honored in life." And in the house on Sycamore Street, 3 people, soon to be 4, slept peacefully, bound together by a love that had survived death itself and emerged stronger, deeper, more beautiful than ever. The story that began with mysterious flowers had become something greater than anyone could have imagined. Not a tale of replacement or forgetting, but of expansion and inclusion. Not about moving on from loss, but about carrying it forward with grace, allowing it to open doors rather than close them. Lydia's final gift hadn't been the letters or the carefully timed revelations. It'd been the example she'd set in life, to love generously, to forgive completely, to believe that people deserve second chances, and to trust that the bonds we form can transcend even death. That gift kept giving, rippling outward in ways she could never have predicted, but surely would have celebrated. In Corwin's healing, in Vivian's redemption, in Naomi's joy, in the new life growing, connecting past and future in the most tangible way possible. The white lilies would continue appearing at Lydia's grave every Sunday, placed by hands that loved her. The bench would continue offering comfort to strangers and friends alike. The photographs on the mantel would continue telling their story to anyone who looked closely enough to understand. And the family on Sycamore Street would continue living, not despite their loss, but informed by it, deepened by it, made more compassionate and more grateful, because they understood how precious and fragile and absolutely worth fighting for love truly is. This was Lydia's legacy, not just in the daughter she'd raised or the husband she'd loved, but in the family she'd helped create, even from beyond the grave, in proving that love, real love, wants only happiness for those it touches. That letting go and holding on can happen simultaneously, that the past and future need not be enemies, but can dance together in the present moment. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, a new day began for the family that loss had scattered and love had reformed. They would face it together, all of them, those who slept and those who watched from beyond, those who lived and those who lived on in memory. And in the quiet morning air, if you listened carefully enough, you might have heard something like laughter, joyful, free, and full of love. The sound of a woman who'd given everything she had and found that her gifts kept multiplying long after she'd gone. The mystery was solved. The healing had begun. And life, beautiful and complicated and absolutely worth living, continued on.